First of all, what is knowledge? If you think about a hierarchy where you have data at the bottom, and that's just facts or symbols, 1, 2, 7, whatever, then you move up to information, which answers questions like who, what, when, and where. So who did what at what time? What thing happened when? Those sorts of things are information. Knowledge, which is what we're going to talk about here, is answering questions like how? How did that work? What is the model? What is the system? How does that all fit together? Above this is wisdom, and we don't have wisdom capture systems. We don't talk about capturing wisdom. So we're going to stick with knowledge. And the first thing to think about knowledge is remembering that it is all about how things work. It is the how. And so when Gary Klein in Sources of Power talks about building mental models, that's what knowledge is. Knowledge is a funny thing because it comes from very random places and discoveries are made all the time. So think about finding planets. If you're finding planets and you're looking through a telescope, you're looking out at the stars and you're trying to see a planet. Chances are not very likely you're going to see one. Why is that? Well, planets are small, suns are big, stars are big, and the amount of light from a star versus what's going to get reflected off a planet, it's just very difficult to see. But one thing that was able to be done is we figured out how to use something we had learned about called the Doppler effect. If you've ever had a train go screaming by you, and it sounds like the pitch changes of the wheels and of the whistle and all that, and it feels like the pitch is changing, well, it is sort of. It's called the Doppler effect, and the pitch is changing because as the train's moving forward to you, the waves are stacking up, and so it's a slightly higher pitch, and as it's going away, they're getting stretched out, it's longer. Well, in the case of a planet, we can see the light frequency shift slightly when a massive planet starts to wobble the star. It actually starts moving closer and further away from us because of that. So this is a case where we applied something we knew today to a very different problem and got new information about the number of planets in the universe. It's really cool, but it also means we're reaching into different pockets to figure out information. All right, let's talk a little bit about this. So first of all, how many is this? If you're looking at this, how many is this trying to indicate? 0, 1, 2, 3? Well, it depends on where you are. In most cases in the US, this looks like 1. This is person ordering one thing. But if you're in Germany like I was, and you use your first finger to count, they'll think you want to order 2 pizzas because we have our thumb and they start counting on their thumb. It's a really simple thing. A lot of this comes out of the idea from the art of explanation that we have the curse of knowledge. We believe we know something, and so we don't even think to explain it. What about this one? This one's fun. Which side of the mall do you walk on? Well, for most of the world, the U.S., most of the world, you're going to walk along the right side. You do that because it's just habit. You drive on the right side of the road, so you should walk on the right side of the mall. Seems funny, but it happens well in most cases, right up until the point you go someplace that has the opposite pattern. So, for instance, in the UK, when I was there, it's really awkward to have people trying to walk into me as I'm walking down the right side of the mall. Crazy. What about this? Is it rude or is it respectful? Now, if you're in the Midwest in the United States where I am, this is respectful because you've said to your host, I really enjoyed my meal. This was so great, I had to stuff it all in. Now, if you do it in China or in other parts of the Pacific Rim, this could be rude. In China, hosts feel like they have to provide more for you than you can eat. And so if you eat everything and there's nothing left, they'll be embarrassed. The key with these examples and why I brought them out is there's a lot of context and a lot of cultural norm that are sitting behind the things that we do. They're just rules that we live by that we don't even think about. If you go back to the LA riots some number of years ago, people are looting stores, they're breaking windows and stealing stuff, and they're still parking inside the lines. There's all kinds of this stuff that we just don't think about. Okay, so we've had a way for doing trades for a very long time. We've had the apprentice who did simple, repeatable things, the journeyman who started to do more complex things, more assembly, more putting things together. But the journeyman still followed the rules. There'd be a set of rules laid down, and the journeyman really still follows those. The master, someone who is a master at their craft, is creative, and they're following principles rather than following rules. So let me give you an example of what I mean by that. So the Pythagorean theorem says a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And it's a great way to square a deck. If you've got a small deck and you want to square it, you do 3 by 4, and the diagonal should be 5. Great. That works really well up until the point that you build a deck that's like 20 by 40. And even a small amount of error when done 3 by 4 by 5 extends out into a problem. And so a master would know the Pythagorean theorem. He would understand the principle of squaring things off. A journeyman might just know the rule. The rule is 3, 4, 5. So when we're training for knowledge, when we're trying to figure out how to find knowledge, when we're trying to organize knowledge, we have to think about the fact that there are principles, there are rules, and there are procedures. There's stuff that simple people need to do. Well, I said that I would help with how adults learn, and this is androgyny, which is Malcolm Knowles' work, him and his colleagues, about how people learn. They've studied adults and said, hey, how do adults learn? The learner needs to know. In an adult world, we've learned so much, we have to know that we need to know it. We have a self-concept of where we are and how other knowledge relates. We have prior experience with things. And then we have a readiness to learn. Are we feeling overwhelmed? An orientation to learning, is it a good thing? And our motivation to learn. So these are the factors that help adults learn. The beautiful thing about building an information architecture is most of these things start to line up for us in terms of the person is going to be willing, ready, motivated to learn, because in most cases they're coming to us. They're seeking out the learning. That's all fine, except there's this thing called the reticular activating system. Now, the reticular activating system regulates our sleep-awake cycle, but it also regulates something else, which is our attention. So we want to be aware of this as we're looking at how do we help people find knowledge. And that is, the reticular activating system activates our attention. It supports high attention situations where we need to be focused. It also does things where it will flag things. It'll bring things to the front for us if they have some special meaning to us. So many, many years ago, I bought a Mitsubishi 3000 GT VR4, a sports car. And as soon as I bought it, I started noticing all the other 3000 GT VR4s on the road. And you've probably done the same thing. You bought a car, and all of a sudden, everybody seemed to be driving the car. This is our self-concept of the learner. We have a higher level of attention to that because we are related to it. So I often get asked, how does information architecture and knowledge management differ? And if you look at knowledge management exercises are the whole circle, where information architecture and information management are just the collect, review, share, and access. Those happen to be the AIM standards. What you get to with knowledge management is the additional pieces. So knowledge management is a wrapper around all of the things that we've been talking about here in information architecture. Two things, and then we'll leave this knowledge section. The first is that whenever you're working with knowledge, the greatest lubricator is trust. Trust is so important in business, and people who are mismatched, if you've got a different skill set than somebody else, you'll rub, and so you want that trust to trust that they're in wanting to do the right thing with you. All of the friction that you have between you and that other person robs the value. So there's lots of things about creating trust. It's reflexive, and you have to trust other people. But I want you to focus here just for a second on the idea that as you go to try and create information architecture and you move that into the space of knowledge management and helping people feel like they can learn from others, that you need to build trust in your organization. Okay, last one. This is knowledge transfer tactics, and this is mostly from a book called Lost Knowledge. There are interviews that you can do, documentation that you can do. Most of us have done documentation to death. We hate it. We have training you can do. You can do storytelling. Stories are a great way for people to learn. We learn about 80% of what we're getting not in an intentional way. You can do mentoring and coaching. You can do after action reviews, and you can build communities of practice. These are ways to support and encourage the transfer of knowledge.